G'day and welcome back to Reality Check. I'm your host, Ross Coulthart, and today it's my honour to bring to Reality Check for the very first time the filmmaker who has probably done more than anyone else to elevate public awareness of the legitimacy of UFOs, UAPs as an authentic mystery worthy of intense investigation. Filmmaker James Fox is an English-born American filmmaker whose first UFO documentary was made nearly 30 years ago. He's done Out of the Blue, I Know What I Saw, The Phenomenon, Moment of Contact, and The Program. That's his most recent one. They are brilliant, credible, factually driven presentations that stand out because they dared to take the UAP subject seriously. Now, it's James's 2022 film, Moment of Contact, that brings him back here today. That film is James's investigation into the 1996 Vargia UAP incident, often called the Roswell of Brazil. Now, James has just finished updating that film with major new evidence. I'm very excited to bring this to you today. He has explosive new details that we are going to tell you about today for the very first time. I caught up with James at Contact in the Desert way back in May, and he whispered in my ear over a coffee about what he had in this film update. And boy, I've been waiting for months here. He called me literally yesterday and said, I've got it, I'm ready to go. And I'm so excited that he's asked us to help lead out this film because it's very exciting what he's got. James has obtained an exclusive interview with a neurosurgeon who says he quite literally touched and telepathically communicated with what he testifies on the record to James was a live alien being held in captivity by Brazilians and then apparently handed over to the US military. James, I'm very excited to bring you here to Reality Check. Welcome, sir. Maybe we could start off by giving us a bit of a summary of what the Vargia case was all about.
Thank you so much for having me on, Ross. I really appreciate it. And I don't know if that was deserved intro, but I appreciate it very much. So thank you. Well, let's see how far back I can go here. I was making my second UFO film in the late 90s, Out of the Blue, with a partner. It was probably circa 1999. And I'll remind your audience, I was making my second documentary on UFOs. And we were mapping out the film, and we were going to cover Bentwaters and the Phoenix Lights and various other cases around the world. And my partner at the time was a former BBC correspondent, Tim Coleman. He said, "Oh, mate, so we got to get this, Brazilian case. It was absolutely unbelievable. These aliens walking around in the live, And I thought, I picked the wrong partner for this film. This guy's out of his mind. Like, there's no way that happened. So I just want everyone to understand, that's how I was introduced to this case. Fast forward over 10 years, more than 10 years. Yeah, probably. Any case, I'm invited to Brazil on a separate account. I just finished a film called I Know What I Saw, which is a 2-hour special for the History Channel. And I get invited to give a presentation in Brazil in a place called Peruíbe, which is sort of the south of Sao Paulo. And Stanton Friedman is there. So I love Stanton Friedman, and I respect him tremendously. He's the guy that, thanks to him and a handful of others, we know about Roswell. So I'm there with Stanton, and I'll back up a second. Right before I left, there was a very good friend of mine who was very high up in the entertainment industry, Jeff Sagansky. I'll use his name. He's fine with that. And he said, "Oh, James, you're going to Brazil. You have to look into that Varginha case." And I was, "Oh God, not this, please." But I had a lot of respect for him. And I said, "Jeff, yeah, sure. I'll look into that for you. Yeah. I'll definitely do that." Click. And I said to myself, I'm not wasting 1 second on this case. So I fly to Brazil, and I'm there at this conference with Stanton Friedman, and the topic came up. I think there was a witness there or something. And Stanton looked at me and he said, "Oh, James, yeah, you don't know about the Vargia case." And I said, well, I know about it, but live aliens walking around in town, like, please. And he goes, not so fast. There's a lot of very compelling firsthand testimony. So that was the impetus for me to say, okay, let me have a look. Let me poke around a little bit. And so the more I looked, the more I found. And here we are 16 years later. And we've got the most compelling, in my humble opinion, firsthand eyewitness testimony the world's ever seen. And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so to kick off the events, would it be fair to say that probably the defining event that kicked this all off is the testimony of a pilot, Carlos de Souza, 13th of January 1996, and he spots a cigar-shaped object about the size of a school bus emitting smoke, losing altitude over Vargia, and he follows it to a field. What happens, James?
So he was very early in the morning. He was an ultralight pilot. He was a history professor in Sao Paulo, Carlos de Souza, and he sees what this strange-looking, perhaps it was a prototype, he didn't know, it was a cigar-shaped, aluminum, colored, very early in the morning, and it was clearly in distress. It had a big gash on the side. It had a vapor-type smoke coming out the back, not typical smoke. It was more like a vapor. And he thought, my gosh, that looks like it's going down. And he was right near what's called the Maiolini Farm, which is roughly 10, 12 miles outside as the crow flies from Varginha. And he drives off this freeway and he follows this dirt road up to what he describes as an impact site. He said he saw this thing struggling to stay in the air. It impacts the ground. Half of it stays somewhat intact, and there's rest of debris over a very large area, larger than a football field.
And does he see the craft crashed on the ground?
Yeah, he sees it go down into the ground, and then he lost sight of it, but he saw it go down and crash. Yes.
And when he gets to that location, what happens? Can he get onto the site?
Yes. So he arrives at the site with his car. He gets out of the car, and he sees this. He said the smell was just so horrendous that he grabbed his T-shirt and he put it up over his mouth. It was like sulfur, like ammonia, eyes watering, very, very strong. He said it was so strong he could barely tolerate it. And then he saw these lots of little bits of aluminum. There was one piece of the craft that was intact that was about half of it, about half the size of a large school bus, and lots of bits of debris of various sizes. And he said he picked one of the pieces up. And he said it was as light as a feather. You couldn't really feel it in your hands. And he crumpled it up. And when he opened his hands, it took the shape back up again.
Just like Roswell.
Just like Roswell. And so he was but he wasn't thinking alien. He really didn't know what he was looking at. And then the military trucks rolled in from the military base from the exact opposite direction that he arrived.
So he's absolutely categorical that the Brazilian military intervened, took over a site where what appears to have been an alien spacecraft has crashed. Does he see a body? Does he see any live beings?
Nope. He didn't see any body. I did ask him, I said, was the remaining part of the craft large enough for beings? He said, yes, but I didn't see any beings.
And do the military take the piece of metal that he picked up off him? Do they allow him to...
Oh yeah, they came and they were telling him to leave. And then he was like, I'm just, trying to help. And they took out their rifles and they threatened him. And that's at that point, he didn't have the piece anymore. He got back in his car and left.
Were there any American soldiers with the Brazilian military in that intervention?
Not that he said, no. Mm-mm.
So you've got an obvious crash. I guess in the sequence of events, the next event that has always intrigued me. By the way, I've got to show my personal interest in the Varginha case, James, and this is your fault. I've got a little alien being from Varginha.
Oh my gosh!
That a guy from the United Kingdom who makes models. You've got one as well, I suspect.
Okay. I wasn't going to share this, but I have one too.
Okay.
We have something in common.
No, I've had this in front of my audience now for months, and nobody's picked up on it. So I thought it was time to reveal to the audience that I have an alien being in my set. So
that's really funny. Yeah, that's really great. But let me
I'm just interested in the sequence because
Please.
I've always
Yes.
been struck. You've got that crash about 10 miles out of town. And then, as I
Yep.
understand it, on the morning of January the 20th, there's a couple who report seeing a damaged craft, which presumably is another different craft, flying low over the city of Vargia.
No, no. Okay, so that we made that much clearer in this cut of the film, and we also have footage that we've put together of such a craft. I know this is hard to grasp and to wrap your mind around, but if the claims are true and the witnesses are to be believed, what we were seeing with the craft over Virginia was a rescue operation.
By
Because
non-humans.
yes, because they all said, and I had a hard time believing it, but I interviewed a lot of people and they said it was looking for something. I said, how do you know it was looking for something? Because it was doing a grid search, slow and low and methodical, going over, stopping, back and forth for like a long time.
So it wasn't a damaged craft at all. It was a
Not that
craft
one.
that was looking for
No.
its comrades.
Nope, there were now we have new witnesses on the cigar shaped craft. We have the two farmers, Enrico, I'll think of her last name in a second. They both saw the same thing that Carlos described: a cigar shaped craft with vapor coming out the back early in the morning, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, something like this. We actually got a map and we figured out, okay, we have a sighting, we have Varginia here, we have the farmers that see the craft here, we have another witness that sees the craft over here, and it crashes, and it ultimately crashes right in the middle. It actually makes a lot more sense now that we have that. So we have new witnesses where he was in his farm. We shot there, and he said he heard something very strange in the sky, and he looked out the window and he saw this big cigar-shaped craft making a weird noise like it was in trouble, and it landed on his farm. And that was, so we have that testimony now as well.
Right. And so that's a completely different craft because that's the thing I could never understand. How could the craft have crashed on the 13th of January and then a week later people are saying they've seen the craft again?
We don't know. No. So yeah, the craft that people have described was a disc-shaped craft that we're doing as a grid search operation. Everybody talks about that. The monument over over Virginia is a big disc-shaped craft. That's the craft that people saw that was methodically looking. And I specifically asked all these witnesses, how do you know it was looking for something? They said it was low and it was going out, coming back, stopping, going out, coming back, stopping. It was clearly looking for something. And we really make that distinction this time in the craft because it's like, wow, that's crazy, you know?
Do you have any intelligence, James, on how the craft that did crash, the cigar-shaped craft on the 13th of January 1996, is there any evidence to suggest that it was attacked by us humans, as we now know is the case, that the US apparently has been using high-pulse microwave weapons and indeed in some cases artillery to try and bring down these craft?
I've thought about this for a long time, well over a decade. And I'm thinking to myself, all these witnesses described this craft as having this gash in the back, struggling to remain in the air and smoke. So something collided with it. Okay. Was it a meteor? Was it an asteroid or I don't know, something? I mean, it collided with something. Something hit it. So your guess is as good as mine. I know that there have been orders over the decades of shoot first, ask questions later. Would it surprise me? It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know because the case goes somewhat cold when it gets on the American side. But the Americans, apparently, according to the Brazilians, knew it was coming.
Yeah, I'll get to that. So in terms of our chronology, I'm trying to keep you to a good chronology. On the afternoon of January the 20th, 1996, around 1 p.m., three young women, sisters, Lillian, 14 years old, Valkyria Silva, Valkyria, who's 16, and Katya, who's 22. They encounter something. What do they see?
So my understanding, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was a very hot day because January is summer, and they were taking a shortcut through like a little. It was an area of Virginia that was being developed. There were some construction sites, and there was a cinder block wall and a little gate, and they could go through this field and kind of cut across as a little shortcut. And all three of them were walking together. And one of them said they saw like some graffiti on the cinder block wall, which caught their attention. And they're looking at this graffiti, and then they see what looks like maybe a statue or something slouched up against the cinder block wall. They're looking at it. They're getting closer and closer. Got within 10, 12 feet of it, again in broad daylight, all three of them. And this little creature that looked like it was feeble and suffering went from a crouched position, staring ahead, to turning and looking them right in the eyes. And that sent one of the girls, I think it was Valkyria and her sister Liliani, running, freaked out, like she said she screamed and ran and left Katya. So Katya is locked eyes on this creature, and she's having telepathic communication with it. And Liliani, who I think was 16, and Valkyria was probably 14. Liliani realizes Katya is still back there. I got to go back. And they didn't know she didn't know what that was. She left her sister and ran back to get Katya. But she was just locked eyes on this thing. And it was basically telling I need help. It was feeble. It was scared. It needed help. And she grabbed Katya by the hand and yanked her out of there. And off they went. And that exploded in the headlines.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, it's 4 to 5 feet tall. It's a hairless creature with oily brown skin.
Yes.
And crucially, it had 3 head bumps, which...
Yeah, it had like little lumps, 3 of them, yes.
So that's pretty much what... That's pretty much what they saw, and it's squatting like that, looking directly at that young girl. Yep. Now, you've interviewed the young girls, haven't you?
Multiple times.
And they're adamant that this is what they saw.
No, absolutely no question. They worked with a woman named Beto Rodriguez, who is a artist, and they got together with her, and they created that now infamous poster of the drawing of the creature, and they said it's exactly what it looks like.
Because I noticed that in the official debunk of the whole Vargia case, there's a claim made by the military and the Brazilian government that it was likely a homeless man named Madinho, who was known for crouching in the area due to a mental disability. What do you say to that assertion?
I've seen him. He's a known character in the town. He's still there. Like, I just saw him just a month ago. And everybody knows who he is. Like, he was like, he was a pillar. Everybody knows Medino. It was just so laughable. It's absolute. Yeah.
So with some certainty, you've got triple corroboration there from the 3 young girls, now women. And they're adamant that what they saw was clearly some kind of alien being, not a local homeless man.
1,000%. 1,000%. I mean, they just cringe when you hear that. And the girls are saying, like, they don't know exactly what they saw, but they said it wasn't a human and it wasn't an animal, and it had telepathic communication through the eyes. It was not something of this earth. Is like,
Yeah, the thing I find fascinating, James, is a lot of our folk mythology talks about the devil, and isn't it interesting that they describe an oleaginous figure that essentially could pass for devil-like from our mythology? And it's interesting because the story gets thicker, more intense. Later that day, there's a police officer, Marco Eli Cheresi, a young police officer. He actually reportedly captures a similar creature
just a couple blocks away. A couple hours later, just a couple blocks away.
Is it the same creature?
One would only assume that it had to be. It was like 2 blocks away, a couple hours later.
What does he do with it?
So it's interesting because Marco Cheresi was a military officer, and Eric Lopes, also another military officer. They're both friends. Marco apparently was off for the night, and they get this he gets an APB that, hey, there's something really unusual out lingering, to go capture whatever this thing is. They didn't say it was an ET or anything. It was something very unusual. So those were the orders given to Eric Lopes. Eric calls up his buddy who was off for the night. He says, "Hey, you want to join me? I've got this crazy mission of looking, So Marco Shrees jumps in the car with him, and off they go. And they actually see this creature 2 blocks from where the girls encountered it just a couple hours later, running across the road. So Marco Shrees, without a moment's hesitation, just jumps out of the car and goes and grabs it. And in the process of grabbing it, and it didn't put up much of a fight, it was pretty feeble, and he put it in the back of the car, and he got a little scratch under his arm, and he got some weird oil on his skin. They go to one little tiny hospital. It was more like a clinic. And the doctor apparently came out and took one look and said, I don't know what that is, but you're not bringing it here. So then they go off to regional hospital and they drop it off at regional hospital. So, yeah, sorry.
No, that's good. So you've set this up perfectly now. Is this where Dr. Italo Venturelli comes across the being?
Exactly. Yes. Yep. So we had, up until this point, we had testimony from a military officer who we found that he took a creature from Humanitas Hospital because it went from the first little clinic, didn't get out of the car. Then it went to regional, got out of the car, was delivered, taken indoor. In fact, I was just at regional hospital like 2 weeks ago, and I went to the front desk, the main entry point, and I said, "Hey, this incident," and they got a big plaque out front. This is where an ET came. It's all right out in the open. Nobody's hiding this story. Sure. And I asked the people at the desks coming into the ER, "Hey, have you guys heard?" "Oh yeah, one of the people that was there that night still working here now." And they said, "The creature." "No, I'm not kidding you. I swear to you." And they said, and they got a big plaque outside. I can share you a picture of it, talking about the events. But they took the ET in the back entrance. They said they did not come in the front. They took it in the back.
Did the person you spoke to, aside from Dr. Italo, did they also see the alien being?
Good question. We only had 24 more hours before we were flying home. We got the details. We got the contact information of that individual that was there that night. Don't know. Didn't have a chance to talk to them. Don't know if they.
That's what I love about this, James. Is you've been coming and going from this city now for years, and each time you go back, you get more layers of factual information that corroborate what you've originally uncovered.
You got to hear So now we have, for the first time ever, because we have this military police officer who we got to come forward, and he drove a creature from Humanitas to Eza military base, and then Eza, Campinas, and that's when the Americans came in, right? So now, for the first time ever, we have firsthand eyewitness testimony from the lead neurosurgeon still at the hospital who describes face-to-face contact with the live alien for 4 minutes. It's incredible.
So at this point, James, with your permission, we're going to roll the little sizzle grab you've given us from Dr. Italo Venturelli. Here's Dr. Italo.
Meu nome é Italo Venturelli, estudei em São Paulo, fiz neurologia, neurocirurgia, fiz mais de 5.000 cirurgias. Só queria deixar essa mensagem que eu realmente vi. No dia fui ver como se eu tivesse ido ver um paciente, e não era um paciente, realmente era um alien, claramente um alien. O crânio era em forma de gota, os olhos em forma de gota. Eu fui ver um paciente, achando que era um humano. E eu vi ali um ser maravilhoso de um mundo que eu não conheço. Me pergunto se estava sofrendo, ele não estava sofrendo, se ele estava entendendo, ele estava entendendo. Muito calmo, muito tranquilo, olhou para mim como se entendesse tudo o que eu estava pensando. Eu acho bacana conversar isso, explicar para as pessoas que existem muito mais coisas do que a gente imagina. Para mim foi muito importante ver, porque eu vi a imensidão que tem esse universo, né? Não somos só nós aqui, nesse mundo tão maravilhoso, mas deve existir muitos outros, e aquele ser que estava ali é prova disso.
What I love, James, about Dr. Italo is he's very open about the fact that this being touched him. He seems quite emotional about the experience.
So, okay, I'll tell you how this came about, because it's extraordinary what happened. We knew We knew that the live alien was at Regional Hospital. We have people that we're in touch with over more than a decade that work at both hospitals that we meet privately with every time we go to Virginia. It's always quiet, off the record. They come and there's certain secrets they talk about during surgery and only during surgery. So we knew, and from other testimony, that that creature was it. So the other neurosurgeon who was on duty that night was his sort of protege. It was Dr. Italo and Dr. Marcos Vinicius. Dr. Marco Vinicius did a little procedure on the creature. Apparently, had some damage, some swelling, something happened. Did a little procedure on the creature, and I don't want to go into too much detail because it's an ongoing thing. And then he had a heart attack and died in 2018. Okay, so now he's gone, and his partner, who's the lead neurosurgeon, Dr. Italo, himself had a heart attack just a few months ago, and he's in the ICU, staring at the ceiling, thinking that he was going to die, and he thought, "I can't believe I'm taking this to the grave. This is not right. If I survive this, I'm going public." And then, yep. And so he said, "I'm doing this for my grandchildren, and I don't care what the consequences are. I don't care." That's what he said.
Is such a raw act of courage. Those are the kind of whistleblowers we need, James. And full credit to you. Full credit to you for persuading him to speak to you about it. I just take my hat off to witnesses like Dr. Italo Venturelli for having the courage to come forward. Was he threatened not to speak?
Oh, yeah. So what happened was, and I want to send a shout out to Alini Kras, who's our lead translator and one of our co-producers. She has a very disarming presence, and she calmed him, and he snuck us into the back of the hospital, snuck us in. And we're going, what's happening? What's going on? He sneaks us into the ICU, exactly where it happened. We get masked up because you can't be in the ICU without it. So we get all of our masks on. I don't know where this is going. And all of a sudden, he just starts telling all. Wow. And it was extraordinary. And then the hospital staff caught us filming. And what are you doing in here? You're not supposed to be filming. Nobody has any permits. Nobody, So they kick us out. But we'd gotten the goods. And he's like, "I think I just lost my job." And so they kick us all out. So we leave the hospital and we go into a we didn't know where we're going. We just went into a cafe next door and we're filming at this cafe. We're all like practically crying. And I asked him how it felt after 29 years to come forward, what it was like to look into the eyes of this creature. Tell me what it was like. I was dying to know. And he said it was a higher level of intelligence, so much higher, more advanced. Even though that it was in captivity, it had control of the room. He said, an intelligence way beyond. It was like an angel. But he describes his skin as more white with the big red eyes and the little horns, exactly the way the girls described. And I just thought to myself, was that sort of a defense measure? Did their skin react to the hot sun? When they're scared and freed? I don't know. I don't know.
So is this particular being damaged? Are they injured?
Yes, every being that I might understand. And here's an interesting thing is that I remember when I was first going to include a whole scene from Vargia in the phenomenon, right? So I was covering like Rua and Socorro and a number of other cases in the United States, and I was covering Vargia. And Dr. Roger Lear was adamant. It was like 2012, maybe 2013, and Dr. Roger Lear was just adamant about getting on camera. But at the time I had just flown, we'd rented this filming space in Los Angeles, and we had all these witnesses coming in from different corners of the world about the Africa case, Rua, Zimbabwe, for the 20th anniversary, bringing those guys together. And I was hyper focused on that. I was dealing with Kenneth Arnold's daughter, Kim Arnold, getting her to go on camera for the first time, revealing all these incredible things about his experience. And then Roger and I was backburnered Vargia for the time because I had my hands full. Like we was working 17-hour days, and Roger Lear kind of got upset and he says, "Well, if you're not gonna film me, at least take my tapes." And so he gave me his tapes, and then I digitized them. I don't know what the exact time span was, but I gave them back to him, and then he died. Wow. So fast forward when I was producing because I ended up deleting all of the scenes from Vargia. I mean, it was a very painful day out of the phenomenon because I just couldn't squeeze it in. It was too much, too complicated. We were still missing critical testimony. We couldn't find Sousa, like a number of other people. I said, okay, I'm going to make a movie on this case alone. The heck with the rest of it. And I deleted the whole thing out of there. So fast forward all these years later, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've got the Roger Lear tapes. So I went and found them, and then I bought his book, and I'm reading the book, and I have this incredible encounter. And the tapes were basically a transcript of the book was a transcript of the tapes because I had the tapes. However, there was one scene where he's in Humanitas Hospital talking to doctors that allegedly worked on another alien. And he gave this incredible description of his interview with these two doctors. And that was at Humanitas Hospital, but he talks about communication with this creature, like high-level communication. It's phenomenal.
So we're talking here, is this alien that you're talking about that was at Humanitas Hospital, is that a completely separate being from the one that Dr. Italo is saying that he was trying to treat?
I believe so, but I don't know for sure, but I believe so.
But the implications are, if this is all true and correct, that there are at least two bodies of alien beings, so-called biologics, in the possession now of what we'll learn to be the US military or intelligence community.
Yes. So we also just interviewed the former chief of police of the area all around as a military base. And we've been trying to get him for years, and we would just show up at his house. We just kept doing it year after year after year. And we finally got him a couple months ago. And he says,
is he the guy where you turned up and he was at a window on a house that was elevated above you guys looking up at it? And you were really worried you were going to get shot because he had a gun.
Oh, yeah. No, he said, I will shoot you. That guy, that's a different guy. I was P2 military police. But Pedro was the former chief of police. And it's like we finally showed up at his house. And we were going over there. Maybe it was like 6 o'clock. And we were all in a kind of a hurry. We're trying to continue north to get up to Vargia. We had a lot of filming to do. And I said, hey, let's stop and get some pizza. And it was like, well, we got a job to do. And I wanted to stop and get some pizza. We met this great restaurant owner of pizza, and we had pizza, and we had a little wine. We had a great dinner, but it really cost us a good 90 minutes. And so we were showing up at the former chief of police, Pedro Aguiar, a little later than we wanted to. As it turns out, it was perfect because when we arrived, he had just gotten home 10 or 15 minutes earlier. So it was absolutely divine. It was perfect. And we eventually got our way into his house. And then it's like, hey, you mind if we take a couple pictures? And they got the camera in there. And then we got the audio going. And then he's like, you know what? And he gave us an interview. And he said that he heard that there were 3.
Wow.
That's what he heard. Yeah. And he describes, he saw one of them under a tarp that was probably deceased. He was at the military base Eza. He describes all the helicopters and all the activity. He said he saw more brass that day at Eza military base than he's ever seen in his life. More brass. He talked about the brass. And so we got him to go on the record.
Senior officers, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we got the former chief of police now for the first time. And the military officer, Marco Cheriz, who died a couple weeks after allegedly handling this creature, he dies. Well, the people that did the autopsy is IPD, 2 forensic pathologists, Dr. Giannini and Dr. Armando, both went on the record for the first time for us on camera just recently and said, I did the autopsy. The guy that did the tissue samples, Dr. Giannini, who founded the company, he said, I've never seen bacteria behave in the way that bacteria behaved. It's never before and never since.
So just to remind our audience, this is the military policeman who got a scratch under his arm when he was retrieving the body or the alien, the live alien, and taking it to the hospital that night in the original 20th of January incident. And he'd got that scratch. It had become infected and developed an abscess. And so the pathologists couldn't help him at all. They couldn't treat him.
Well, so he was treated and I talked to another doctor who also treated him just recently. He didn't go on camera, but we met with him privately. And he said we threw the kitchen sink at him and there's nothing we could do. That bacteria was just the most resilient bacteria they've ever seen. Nothing reacted to it and it killed him.
Now, James, I just want at this point, because our audience may be sort of reeling from the number of people that you've cited here. There are multiple corroborative witnesses, people who saw craft, people who saw beings, doctors, military police. How many of these people do you think would be willing to testify publicly to an inquiry under oath?
All of them.
Wow.
And I'm okay. So I can't go into detail right now, but let's just say that I'm working with certain individuals in the government to make that happen.
I'm very
I gotta leave
excited
it
to
right
hear
there.
that. Yeah, because I mean, the thing that blows me away about what you're revealing here, and there's much more to come, is you've done layered quality investigative journalism. This is not something that's easily debunked. You have multiple corroborative witnesses supporting a consistent claim.
I have the head neurosurgeon that runs the entire department at Regional Hospital today, willing to take a public lie detector test and testify that everything he's saying is true. And then there are other doctors that we're talking to now. Like
Did
we're
he
in
lose
that
his,
inner
did he
circle.
lose his job because you did the interview, or was it okay?
It was tumultuous, but he was so in demand that they couldn't, like, he's the lead guy, so they couldn't shoot themselves in the foot. So it's been rough. It's a bit of a rough ride with him. But he said to me, he goes, James, I don't care the consequences. The world needs to know this happened. This being that I encountered communicated with me telepathically. It was a highly advanced intelligence, way more than anything he's ever seen here on Earth. He called it almost like an angel. And it was, despite the fact that it sends chills. Like, despite the fact that it was in captivity, it had control of the room. Now, one more thing I think you were asking me about. So he said it was, because I asked him, how long did you spend? Did you show the trailer of the film yet?
We're going to show the trailer at the very end. I'm going to tease the trailer at the very end.
So I asked him, like, how long did you spend with this creature? You know, I always want to, I want to experience the witnesses. I want so badly to be there in the room with them and know every detail. So just like put me in that room with what did it feel like, you know? And I get all those little just details. I want to hear it all. And he said after about 4 minutes, he stepped out to do something, and the military burst in, I think exactly what he said, burst in, and took the being and threatened everyone with secrecy and then left.
So the being's still alive at that point?
Yes, the being was alive, and the military grabbed it and left.
And this is the Brazilian military. There's no US officers with that Brazilian military team.
There are others claiming, that they were in contact with Americans, but that was later, a little bit later.
And do we know where the being was taken from the hospital where Dr. Italo had attempted to treat it?
We unfortunately, I know that the beings ended up at EZA and definitely Campinas, but I don't know. And then, of course, we have the flight control officer who said that the USAF, which is the United States Air Force flight, came in and it didn't have authorization from the Brazilian government to land. And a higher level government official, Brazilian, walked in and said, let the plane land. So we put out a FOIA request for all air flights in America that came into Brazil from the 14th, I think it was the 13th, to the 27th or something like this. And it took 3 years for our team to get that response. And it came back from the CIA. And it's like, basically, it's a national security issue. It's classified, and your request is denied.
So let me get this very clear, James. Normally, aircraft movements like that would be the subject of very little controversy, and they would be released.
One would imagine, but what do I know? All I know is I asked, and I was told it was like national. It's in the film. You'll see it.
So you know from a military source, an air traffic controller, that a U.S. Air Force plane came into the ESA military base, very, very close to Vargia.
They came to Campinas.
Campinas. Whereabouts is that relative
Not that
to Virginia?
Far. I show it on the map in there. I'd have to say it's to the south, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours south.
But we know,
pretty much
don't
south
we,
of Virginia.
your witness told you that US military helicopters were part of that deployment. Is that correct?
Multiple military witnesses, multiple people. Yes, yes. And even the chief of police described those helicopters just recently.
Can I ask you this? This is what I never understand. Is I appreciate that the Brazilian government at the time and probably now is very close to the US military and the intelligence community. And for a large period of time, the CIA practically ran a lot of governments in South America and Central America. But why on earth would the Brazilian government have allowed an American retrieval team to fly in and take away what is probably the first definitive evidence of a non-human intelligence?
You know, I asked that very question to, I don't know if I should use his name. It's a name that you're familiar with. And he said, because they can.
Really? Yeah.
That's what he said. Yeah, we can do whatever we want.
Because the implications of this are that the Brazilian military and presumably other militaries around the world are colluding with the US military in covering this up. I mean,
I was shocked. I was shocked when I found out America was involved. I had no idea when I started this investigation. None. I was, oh my God. And not only that, they were there intimidating witnesses. I have people on camera talking about it. Yes.
So the US was going around intimidating witnesses.
Yes. You remember there was a whole family of witnesses. A whole family of witnesses. And, you know, they saw to take their account at face value, right? They lived right near where the girls saw the creature and where the capture occurred. There was a disc-shaped object quietly and silently and methodically maneuvering through the neighborhood, low. And they watched it. He goes, I watched it for 30 minutes. The whole family did. And they all talk about it. And so, and then they said the Americans came and it's Americans with some Brazilians. And he said maybe NASA. He wasn't sure if it was NASA. They didn't know. But he said maybe NASA. And they were told, this conversation never happened. We were never here. There were the mother of the two girls got the visit. That was like one of the first times, from men in suits. And she's like, I don't know if definitively that it was the Americans, but they looked like Americans. And then one that had a strong accent that spoke Portuguese. Didn't
they offer her money?
Offered her money to tell the girls to go public on TV that they were lying and they saw it was a dog or something other. Yeah. And the mother refused.
Did the girls ever retract the story?
Never.
Wow. And has the family suffered any retribution from anyone as a result of speaking out?
They said that they've been mocked and laughed at, for decades. Nothing to gain, everything to lose. This is not a career-enhancing, thing, especially back then.
So you've actually got US officials, possibly not military, maybe intelligence, gaslighting and intimidating, bullying, threatening people to try and stop them from talking about what they saw.
No question. And that was one of the first times where I really went all in on reporting on these so-called men in black or men in dark suits. I know it's got a lot of baggage that term is used. But I also, and this individual is going to have to be completely nameless, unfortunately, and I can't even use it. But this individual claimed on the behalf of someone that we've heard of to fly into Brazil and get a piece of that UFO and fly it back to the United States. And this individual swore to me up and down he did. The individual did it. Yeah.
So he was part of the retrieval team.
All I know is that on the behalf of somebody that's pretty high up, he went and he smuggled a piece of an alleged UFO. Didn't say that it was from that particular case, but the timeline would imply that it was of that particular case, but I don't know. But there's more stuff coming out. It's going to continue to come out.
I just want to come back a little bit, James, because it's quite tragic. The story of the military police officer Chiresi who picked up the being and tried to get it medical treatment.
Yes.
His family, that they've got the records, and you've mentioned that the pathologists couldn't do anything for him. What kind of bacteria did they say it was? Was it known within human bacterial understanding?
It was we have just as of like a week or two ago, we got the full report with comments of the autopsy, and we're in the process of having them because our translator, it's very technical, but it was a variant of a particular bacteria that he's never in his life seen, and he's done thousands and thousands of biopsies. He said it was a variant, like it was an evolved bacteria that was resilient and was doing things that he's never seen do before. And
that's important, because one of the debunks on the Chiresi case that's been put out by the officials in the Brazilian military and intelligence community is that this bacteria was nothing unusual, that it wasn't an anomalous bacteria at all. You're categorical that the pathology records that you've newly obtained do verify that this was an anomalous bacteria.
I have him on camera going into total detail about it just recently, looking right at the camera. I'm the guy that did the tissue samples. I'm the guy that saw it. This is what I saw. I've done thousands and thousands of biopsies, never before and never since. That's right now.
I'm very excited to see this new film, James. It sounds like you've nailed down some great information. Can I ask you also about Dr. Italo's telepathic communications with the being? I don't want to take away from what you reveal in the film, but is there any more that you can tell us about what the being communicated to him?
I said to him, because I'm very curious, when you looked in the eyes, because everybody always says when you look in the eyes, that's when it happens, and so what happened when you looked in the eyes? Was there any kind of communication? And yes, he said yes. And then he said, fala se fala, which is speaking without speaking, which I thought was interesting, that it was calm, it was relaxed and calm, and communicating that it was okay to him. And there was, and the way he described it, and I did another, just a couple weeks ago, I did another full sit down 1.5 hour, extremely detailed interview with him, with every possible detail I could possibly extract, that I've yet to completely transcribe and put out into the world, but I will. And perhaps we'd do that with you guys. But where he goes into great detail as much as he can about it. But he said that it was an elevated, advanced intelligence. This is the one thing that he said. There's nothing like it here on Earth. It was.
The other detail, I don't know if it was your documentary or one of the other reports I've read, was that the whole hospital smelt of this ammonia.
That was us. Yes, that was one of the guys at Regional Hospital, and it seemed to have been one of the deceased beings. And the smell was just, and people had described the smell, even when the girls came in within 10, 12 feet of it, the smell lingered in that area, and the mother had come within minutes and the creature was gone, but the smell lingered in her nose. And they all said that the smell was really, really intense. And I don't know if that was, I don't know if that's, I don't know. I don't know if that was some sort of protective thing that they would excrete when they're scared and feeling threatened. I don't know.
Isn't it tragic that the first contact with a non-human intelligence is so acrimonious that essentially a military agency is forcefully removing that alien from receiving the kind of treatment it needed to survive? I mean, it's horrible. I mean, I find the emotional and moral implications of what we're talking about here quite profound.
Oh, believe me, I mean, I do too. And when I asked Dr. Italo on camera what it felt like after 29 years of this bottled up, he started crying. He just, he's been sitting, like, you imagine the weight of that on his shoulders, and he felt so much compassion for this being that was in captivity. The love, the compassion, the elevated consciousness is what he said. He said, we have so much to learn from the eyes of that being.
And yet, for 30 years, it's going to be 30 years in January next year since this incident occurred, which is why the timing of your new film, your updated film, is so important. The Brazilian government and military have persisted with the claim that this is all fiction. They've dismissed any kind of claims that extraterrestrials were recovered. They've classified the events as routine exercises. They said that the creature was likely this homeless man, Modino, that the military vehicles were for standard maintenance, not retrievals. They said that this is my favorite one, the hospital aliens were debunked as a dwarf couple seeking medical care.
Yeah, I heard that one too. I know.
They also said
so
there was
ridiculous.
no evidence supporting alien bacteria causing Chiretse's death, which
that's you're gonna hear directly from the people that did the autopsy and studied the samples from the founder of the company that did the autopsy. Directly, Dr. Giannini, and he said the same thing. I don't care. He's older now, and he's like, this is what I saw, and I can't explain it, and I've never seen anything like it before, and I've never seen anything like it since.
God bless these people for having.
And there are other things. There are other things, like we're contacting the lead general who's now retired, and we are actually engaging with this general right now.
Well, that was my next question. There's obviously been political change in 30 years. Brazil has become a slightly more progressive society. The government's a bit more open-minded. Is there any likelihood of military officials opening up and telling more about what they know?
There's a lot more going on behind the scenes. There are members of I think it's parliament with senators that are reaching out directly and indirectly for possibly hearings in Brazil. There are efforts going on internally about meetings in the United States. There are doctors that are deciding, contemplating joining Italo, coming forward. I had meetings just recently with the whole inner circle of those doctors and the people that run those hospitals. So this is, in my opinion, I think this is the beginning of the beginning. So could I be wrong? I could be wrong, but I don't think so. There's a movement happening unlike anything I've ever seen.
And it's not just on Vargia. I think people have realized that to some degree Congress isn't going to take the initiative. It has to come from people who've had direct knowledge and experience, which is, actually, this is probably a good time to promote it, and we'll do it at the end, James. If there are people, military personnel who were part of the retrieval operation, who want to speak to you confidentially and exchange information, how can they get information to you?
That's great. That's a great question. Thank you so much. I have a Proton email, and I'll give it to you right now. It is momentofcontact@proton.me. Momentofcontact@proton.me, and we'll be very mindful of any national security issues or secrecy or whatever the request is.
Clearly, there are people who are operating under TS-SCI, top secret compartmented clearances, who are forbidden from speaking about this. And this is something that when you went to Washington, you've also, in this Moment of Contact film, you've also gone to Washington, D.C. and covered the congressional hearings where multiple witnesses have given evidence of what they know, what they saw. One of them is Dr. Eric Davis. He's a friend of both of us. He's an astrophysicist. He's been heavily involved in investigating paranormal UAP phenomena for many decades. He worked with Robert Bigelow at the National Institute of Discovery Science. He was part of the BASS investigations, the federal government-funded investigations into the subject. This is what he told you in this exclusive interview.
Where's the proof? We have alien spaceships in our possession. Mm-hmm. We have bodies. Where and why can't I get the specifics to verify those claims?
If the President of the United States issued an executive order that absolves me of all of my TS-SCI NDAs, NDAs are non-disclosure agreements. Those are the agreements we have to sign for every compartment in our SCI clearances. So if the president waives or absolves my obligation to those NDAs, and I get subpoenaed by Congress, somebody on Capitol Hill, some committee, either in the Senate or the House or the both, to reveal everything I know that I learned from my investigations, both unclassified and classified, into the legacy UAP, crash retrieval, and hardware reverse engineering and NHI programs, I would do so. If I could be waived from that or absolved in some fashion by presidential order, And if Congress subpoenas me, yes, I would go and tell them everything I know.
Dr. Eric Davis makes it very clear there, James, that he knows stuff. He, as you know, investigated the claims that there was this legacy UAP, NHI, non-human intelligence craft retrieval program, and he became aware, he's testified before, that there has been this ongoing reverse engineering program. What he's saying, though, is very significant, because he's essentially saying, if the president, if Donald Trump was merely to say, overnight, I can waive those secrecy orders, I can waive those NDAs, he, Dr. Eric Davis, and presumably many other witnesses could come forward. So how significant is Eric Davis's comment?
Well, it's extremely significant. And, I asked them those specific questions because I feel the frustration among the community, among people that have seen, for instance, Dave Grush back in 2023 making these extraordinary claims and not really providing publicly the extraordinary evidence needed to verify those claims. So I'm constantly thinking as a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker, how to address those issues. Okay, so you've got someone with all these clearances and you sign NDAs. How do we circumvent that? So I've been asking a lot of people like Eric Davis, would you be willing, provided under the right circumstances, we make a plea to President Trump, whoever the president is, the president of the United States, wave the magic wand, provide immunity, which they can do immediately. Would you testify under oath to a bipartisan group of lawmakers and give the details needed to verify the claims? And they're all saying yes. So let's do it. And if there's nothing to it, then hey, you got nothing to hide.
And I can tell you, James, I know multiple people who would fall over themselves to come forward like that. They're patriots, so they're never going to breach their secrecy oath unless they're authorised to do so. Some of them have actually given evidence in confidence to the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence privately in a skiff. But they really want the public to hear their evidence. And at the moment, we seem a bit hamstrung because Congress isn't passing the disclosure laws that would allow the protection of these whistleblowers, to allow particularly contractors, government contractors, not military employees, but government contractors, to feel safe about coming forward.
You imagine it's like, okay, there's nothing to see here. Fair enough. Pass the act, pass the bill. The disclosure, UAP Disclosure Act, like pass it. I mean, why?
So do you think, James, from your knowledge of what's going on, do you think President Trump's being got at on this issue? Or do you think, as J.D. Vance, the vice president, indicated just very recently in an interview with Miranda Devine, I think her Pod Force One, he admitted that he's actually interested in the subject matter, but that they've been distracted by so many other issues, but they're going to...
So I'm only speaking from personal experience. I've interviewed Carter and Ford and indirectly President Clinton, and they all basically said that they made inquiries into the UAP or UFO phenomenon and were not happy with the answers they were getting. So it's extraordinary to think that the president, the commander-in-chief of the United States, could get an intelligence community to basically steer him away from any information. However, I think we're living in different times now. I think there are enough people talking about it. We've had 4 congressional hearings in the last several years. The word is out. The implications, global implications, are so profound that I think creating the right circumstance and really making a plea to the president, I think he just might do it. So I'm optimistic.
Well, so am I. I mean, I must confess, I do think it's time for the public to actually see what these witnesses all know. And there are witnesses who want to come forward with direct evidence. I mean, I've actually spoken to people who've touched these craft, James. That's why I'm very sure that the legacy program is a reality. And what's stopping them is these top secret SCI clearances that require them to keep it confidential, even to lie about it if they're asked about it publicly. So I think the president really is, the ball is now in his court about whether or not he wants to be open about it.
It's one of the reasons why I put the quote from Eric Davis at the end of the movie. I want the world to see, like, these people are willing to come forward, wave the magic wand, provide immunity, and we will give the details needed to verify these claims. You can't say no to that. Like, if there's nothing to hide, give them immunity. Let them talk.
So, James, obviously, your film's coming out. When will your film be coming out?
Later this year. We don't have an exact date, but we will soon. Later this year.
But essentially, the 30th anniversary of the Vargia incident is in January next year, 2026.
Yes, the film will come out just before that.
Let's take a look at your trailer, which we're now going to show exclusively here on Reality Check.
Have you been exposed to undeniable confirmation of a non-human intelligence craft?
There is something out there, and we should know as the people what it is.
Do you believe that the federal government is knowingly concealing evidence about UAPs from the public?
100%.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
Non-human, exotic origin, vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
For the first time in history, the names of alleged companies and gatekeepers analyzing recovered alien technology are being exposed.
Are any of you willing to name specific individuals?
Dr. James Ryder at Lockheed, Glenn Gaffney, CIA.
For decades, we've heard allegations of the retrieval of objects of alien origin.
In 1933, some disc-shaped object crashed.
It was not anything from this earth.
A UFO crashed in Kingman.
Didn't drop out of the sky. It had to come in on an angle.
The feeling I had during the encounter was like no type of aircraft I've ever seen before.
I saw the evidence. It's a crash retrieval, there's a craft, and there's alien bodies.
But one of the most well-documented UFO crash retrieval cases involving live aliens took place in Vargia, Brazil.
There's a crashed vehicle.
Dois seres extraterrestres foram capturados, depois, posteriormente, foram levados para o hospital.
Meu nome é Carlos de Souza.
Meu nome é Cátia Xavier. Meu nome é Liliane Silva. Meu nome é Valquíria Silva. Em 1996, eu vi uma criatura desaranhada.
Fui até o local quando o general de brigada falou para mim que era assunto de segurança nacional. Ele morre por aí, acabou.
Deu pra ver nitidamente. Era charuto no ar.
O negócio da esquerda, eu nem quis tocar, porque vai deixar o sino aqui na bala. Levaram para Campinas e Campinas levaram para os Estados Unidos.
Now, for the first time in history,
nunca vi caso assim.
We have the most compelling first-hand testimony.
Todo mundo surpreso. Sim, qualquer que isso sofreu uma punição muito severa.
Communication with a live alien in captivity.
Os olhos eram como se fosse uma gota de água.
How much time did he spend with the alien in the room?
3, 4 meses.
Wow, James, that trailer is extraordinary. Dr. Italo Venturelli, he oozes credibility.
You know, Dr. Italo is willing to put his right hand on a Bible and take a public lie detector test tomorrow. He has everything to lose and nothing to gain, and he's not coming forward anonymously.
Well, I would love to see him and so many of these direct witnesses that you found in Vargia come forward to both the Brazilian Parliament and the US Congress and give their evidence in open public hearings under oath.
Yeah, there's things going on behind the scenes right now to facilitate events like what you're talking about.
And let's hope that President Trump or someone close to him, maybe Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and the acting National Security Advisor, who does have a strong interest in the UAP subject and has admitted that this is a subject that needs to be taken seriously. Maybe J.D. Vance, who indicated very recently in another podcast that he was also interested in the UAP issue. Maybe we can see some leadership from the new administration and show some guidance to the public about what's really been going on. James Fox, thank you so much for bringing this extraordinary story to Reality Check. Where will people be able to watch Moment of Contact?
Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Fandango, Google Play. I'll be making announcements in the upcoming days and weeks.
And just to remind people, if you have any hot tips you want to give James Fox, the email he gave us earlier is momentofcontact@proton.me. And of course, you can always contact us here with your queries or tips at realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. And of course, this show will not just be available on YouTube, we'll be giving it a plug, of course, on NewsNation, on the main TV, but we'll also be airing it on all of the podcast channels, including Audible and Spotify. Great to talk to you, James. Thank you so much for being with us here on Reality Check, and best wishes all.
I appreciate being on. Thank you so much, Ross.
Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. I'm Ross Coulthart, and today we're delving into the mystery of 9/11. Now, I was a reporter covering the tragedy, the attack on the incredible attacks on America in 2001. And it's a shock to me today, as it was back then, the way in which this incredibly well-planned attack happened under the radar of the most powerful country in the world and the most well-informed intelligence agencies working for that country. It was an appalling intelligence failure, catastrophic intelligence failure. And the thing that leapt out to me as a reporter in the days following the attacks was, why were so many Saudis, including Saudis who were linked to the House of Saud, families with close connections to the royal family in Saudi Arabia, why were they, when there was a no-fly zone over the United States, allowed to discreetly leave the United States, including, incredibly, as we discovered in the days following, about 24 members of the bin Laden family, no less. And I spoke at the time to an FBI investigator who told me that he, for the life of him, couldn't understand why, if these people were being allowed to leave America, why weren't statements being taken off them? What was the explanation for that? And a lot of those questions remain unanswered. And of course, 3,000 plus people died in that tragedy, and our guest today is one of those people who lost loved ones. Terry Strada, you represent an organisation that is taking a lawsuit against the Saudi government, and I think also members of the bin Laden family. Maybe if you could just please introduce yourself to Reality Check, and I want to explore with you today what's going on behind the scenes, the mysteries, the questions that are still unanswered about 9/11.
Yes, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Terry Strada, and I am the National Chair for the 9/11 Families United. This organization consists of over 10,000 victims' family members, injured survivors, and those who are sick and dying from their exposure to the toxic fumes at Ground Zero. We are suing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the role that it played in aiding and abetting the 19 hijackers that came here and murdered our loved ones.
So that's a big call. Obviously, I don't doubt for a moment that bin Laden and his family, I know that members of the bin Laden family were funding, perhaps inadvertently, let's give them that excuse, through the Al Haramain charity. I know that money was going from very wealthy people in Saudi Arabia, including members of the bin Laden family, directly to some of the 9/11 hijackers. But in the 9/11 Commission report, there was very much a spin that came through that report that such connections, such charitable payments were inadvertent, that they weren't intended. And there was the idea pushed by the 9/11 report. I mean, this is the definitive investigation into the 9/11 investigation. We were told that, quote, "It does not appear that any government other than the Taliban financially supported al-Qaeda before 9/11, although some governments may have contained al-Qaeda sympathizers who turned a blind eye to al-Qaeda's fundraising activity. And it went on to say Saudi Arabia has long been considered the primary source of al-Qaeda funding, but we have found no evidence that the Saudi government as an institution or senior Saudi officials individually funded the organisation. And they said in brackets, this conclusion does not exclude the likelihood that charities with significant Saudi government sponsorship diverted funds to al-Qaeda. Now, Terry, that's the definitive finding from the 9/11 Commission, which was obviously quite a few years ago. What do we know now?
We know so much more now than we did when the 9/11 Commission was published. The FBI withheld a lot of evidence that they were mandated to hand over to the 9/11 Commission. They withheld it from them. They've withheld it from the 9/11 family's lawsuit. But we have been able to uncover quite a lot of new evidence. But if you don't mind, I'd like to put the lawsuit into perspective, and that you have to go back to the 1990s leading up to 2001 and remember that the kingdom was exporting extremism all around the world. They were sending their religious clerics and operatives into their mosques, and they were spreading the virulent Wahhabi form of Islam. The United States was not immune to this activity. Mohammed bin Salman himself, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, he acknowledges that his government partook in this type of activity. And now we know from U.S. intelligence reports that some of these operatives, and they were working out of the Saudi Arabian embassy in Washington, D.C. They were working in a program called the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, MOIA. And some of these individuals we now know were directly assisting the 9/11 hijackers. When we took this to court, I'll just finish and you can use it however you want. But when we took this evidence and laid it out in front of a judge, put it out on the table, and we had FBI reports, affidavits, U.S. investigative reports, and we laid it all out, and we challenged the kingdom to prove that these individuals were not Saudi government officials. The Saudi Arabian government was unwilling to do that and unable to do that. And that is why the judge ruled that our lawsuit could move forward.
Because previously there was a sovereign immunity, you couldn't sue a government. And what's the law that was passed in the Congress that allowed this lawsuit to happen? Can you explain that to our audience?
Yes, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, it's called JASTA, and that's the acronym for it. And that is a law that was enacted in 2016. It took 7 years to enact this piece of legislation that allows U.S. citizens that are harmed by a designated terrorist organization that commits a terrorist attack on U.S. soil, that we can hold the sponsors of that attack responsible in a court of law, in a U.S. court, in civil litigation. And the purpose for that is fulsome liability, to enable the victims' families, the injured survivors, to have some type of accountability. And that law what enabled us to continue our lawsuit in the courtrooms, because yes, they were being granted sovereign immunity, which nobody is entitled to if they're involved in a terrorist attack.
So, Terry, before we go any further, I'm going to ask you about what happened to your loved one. Let's talk about your own personal experience with 9/11 very briefly.
Okay. So I lost my husband, Tom. He was 41 years old. He worked for Cantor Fitzgerald. He was on the 104th floor of the North Tower. On that Tuesday morning, he got up to go to work, and I stayed home with our 3 children. Tommy was 7, Caitlin was 4, and the baby was 4 days old, Justin. Tom was only going to go to work for half a day and come back early because we had the newborn in the house. Shortly after the first plane hit the North Tower, my phone rang and Tom was on the other end, and it was horrible. He was frantically telling me what was happening, and I could hear the screams and the fear. We had over 25 friends that he worked with on his desk, every single person, because nobody made it out of Cantor that day. So with that phone call, I call it a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing for him to reach me, but it's been a curse I've had to live with, hearing that and being, kind of brought right into the horror of all of it.
And you've dedicated pretty much your entire life since to getting to the truth of why that attack was allowed to happen.
Yes, I have. I started in 2002 when I stood on a stage in Washington, D.C. with some of the bravest 9/11 families I know, and we announced our lawsuit. Back then, my organization was called 9/11 Families United to Bankrupt Terrorism. And the mission hasn't changed. We've wanted to expose the underbelly of terrorism, the financiers, and we believe if we can hold them accountable and punish them, that we can stem the flow of money that supports these terrorist organizations. And I believe if the U.S. government, my own government, had taken a stronger stance on terrorism financing after 9/11, we might not see the growth of Boko Haram, Hamas, Hezbollah. We wouldn't have empowered other countries. You can finance terrorism because even the United States doesn't hold you accountable. But the families.
So Terry, I had my own personal experience with Wahhabist Islam, funded by the Saudi Arabians. I covered the Bali bombing attack, and I saw things I never ever want to see again: burned bodies and people who subsequently died who were suffering terrible burns in hospital in Bali. I was sent over there by my Australian network in the very early days. And then we went to Solo in Java, where we confronted Abu Bakr Bashir, who was the Jama'ah Islamiyah boss of the Jama'ah Islamiyah terror group. And the thing that shocked me was how a lot of the people involved in the Bali bombing were middle-class kids whose Jakarta-based parents had looked for a cheap private school education offered by the Wahhabist madrasas funded by the Saudi government across Indonesia. And what shocked me was that there were people from your country's CIA in the American embassy who were telling me how this was the real cancer that was radicalizing young youth right across Southeast Asia. And one of the problems that we have in Australia, we have beautiful Muslim communities, but there are a fringe of extremist young people and elderly Wahhabist clerics who have a malign influence on the people in these communities because of essentially a strand of Islam, extremist, zealous strand of Islam that was funded directly by the Saudi government as a way of propping up Saudi influence. And you're saying that this is very much the same kind of cancer that's behind what you've uncovered in your investigations.
Yes, absolutely. It is the kingdom spreading of extremism around the world. That was their second export to oil in the 90s. They don't deny it. Everybody, our government acknowledges it, and so does MBS.
Okay, but can I come then to the quick?
Mm-hmm.
I want to take you through the evidence that we know about at the moment in the lawsuit, because I think one of the difficulties you have as a campaigner is that you're probably aware of some of the redacted material that at the moment is not public information.
Right.
And I'm a little bit aware of some of that material that points to more alleged complicity of senior Saudi government officials. The question in my mind is, yes, you had a lot of extremist Wahhabist supporters inside the Ministry of Islamic Affairs in Saudi Arabia. And the line that was pushed by the 9/11 report was that because the Saudi royal family, the House of Saud, they don't really govern. They let the governing be done for them. They were unwittingly exploited by these extremist Wahhabists inside the government, that they weren't aware of these people doing these terrible things, funding through known charities these terror groups. Let's go through the evidence that you have at the moment for your lawsuit that's public, including the video that came out most recently. And then let's talk about what might be behind the redacted material that you're still pushing to get put out into the public domain.
Right. So 10 days after September 11th, the Metropolitan Police in London raided Omar al-Bayoumy's apartment. And he was, at that time, a person of interest because his name was on the lease for the two hijackers that crashed into the Pentagon, Hazmi and Madar, the first arriving hijackers. When they seized this evidence out of his apartment, it was a treasure trove of evidence. And they sent it to the FBI. It contained videos. It contained his phone book. It contained a drawing, a plane trajectory, which we can talk about. And when the FBI received it, they did absolutely nothing with it. They actually buried it for at least 10 years.
Now, why did that happen? I mean, I've got friends in the FBI. I know people in the counterterrorism groups in the FBI. They were dedicated people who really wanted to nail the bad guys that were responsible for 9/11. What went wrong, Terry?
There's absolutely wonderful people in the FBI that dedicated their lives to investigating what happened. But there were people within the FBI that did not want the truth to come out, and they have bent over backwards to protect the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's self-preservation. At that level, those people never wanted to take any responsibility for their failures. But that isn't why 9/11, it's part of why 9/11 happened, but it's because of the kingdom putting their government employees into the Saudi Arabian embassy, and it was because of their extremist beliefs that they then supported the 19 hijackers, and they created the support network that was needed here in the United States in order for them to carry out the attacks. Everything they needed, from their housing, their car rentals, their plane lessons, their airplane tickets to practice run. So for 12 to 18 months, the hijackers were here, and there was a support network that was put in place by Saudi government officials, by government people on the Saudi government payroll that are responsible.
So let's just quickly talk about al-Bayoumi. Omar al-Bayoumi, what was his connection to the Saudi government?
In 2017, the FBI confirmed that he was a Saudi intelligence officer. He was not just a Saudi national here on a student visa working for a company that he never showed up to, but was collecting a paycheck. And when the first arriving hijackers got here out in California, where al-Bayoumi was, his salary tripled. He was a Saudi intelligence operative.
Now, one of the things you just mentioned in the raid that was done by Scotland Yard in London, in the apartment in North London where al-Bayoumi was living at the time, there was a document found that appeared to be some kind of document planning the rate of descent necessary for an aircraft to reach a particular altitude and particular location. Can you explain to me what we know about that document?
Yes, it's called the plane drawing. And when Bayoumi was deposed, he admitted it was his handwriting. So we know it belonged to al-Bayoumi. And what it is, as you just said, it's a trajectory and it's calculations of, if you didn't have instruments, how would you land the plane? And it shows, if you put the calculations in, and experts have done this, it shows the rate of descent needed to hit a target on the ground. I think one of the calculations also, when they did the mathematical equations, showed the descent to hit the Twin Towers. So there's a drawing of an airplane, there's the mathematical calculations, and when you do the calculations as an expert, as a pilot does, I think we used a pilot that had 7 decades of experience in military and commercial aviation. And they have concluded that no doubt this was part of the 9/11 attacks.
Now, one of the things that there was a Senate Select Committee for Intelligence report that was done, because I think of a lot of the good work done by yourself, raising public awareness of the fact that there were unanswered questions, that there was clearly redacted material that was being withheld by the US government.
Yes.
And I think from memory, there was a Florida Democratic senator called Bob Graham, who was the chair, like he was the most powerful person on the Senate Intelligence Committee at the time. And he said in his sworn statements after their report came out that there was evidence of support from the Saudi government for the terrorists. And incredibly, my understanding is there were and still are 28 redacted pages from that report that the public still haven't been allowed to see in their entirety.
In 2016, the 28 pages were released, but if you were to add up all of the redactions, it adds up to about 3 pages worth of information, which was critical that they decided to withhold. But what was so astonishing?
That was my point, is that even though they've supposedly released these redacted pages, they're still redacted, and basically
nothing's ever released in its entirety. Nothing.
So
everything is
still
redacted.
hiding stuff.
And some things
still hiding stuff. So
absolutely.
What
but
do
can
you
I tell you what we learned in those 28 pages? What we did learn? We did learn that money was going through Prince Bandar. So he was the ambassador, the Saudi Arabian ambassador to the United States. And money was going through his account as well as his wife's bank account out to California to these handlers, Bayoumi and Thumari. And some money was being transferred, like I said, through their bank accounts out to them in California. So we knew that money was funding from the embassy. What I take away from the 28 pages is the 2 things that we learned was, one, that the Saudis are undeniably complicit in September 11th, and that the Saudis were also never fully investigated. That report came out before the 9/11 Commission.
Let's drill down into that, because, again, there was a brief mention, I think in the 9/11 report or in one of the later reports, that it was Prince Bandar's wife who donated money to the Al Haramain charity, which, funnily enough, is the charity that was funding a lot of the madrasas I was talking about, the religious teaching institutions in Indonesia that I came across, which were helping fund the Wahhabist extremists in Indonesia. Now, the spin that has been put on this is that, yes, these were inadvertent fundings done by, I think, Prince Bandar's wife, that it's part of, I think they call it zakat, and please forgive me, any Muslim friends, if I've mispronounced that, but essentially there is a duty in Islam to support those less well off than yourself. And the argument was that this was an inadvertent funding. It wasn't intentional, and that money channeled through these charities was being given for noble purposes, not specifically and intentionally for terrorism. What evidence do we have to suggest that there was knowledge at the highest levels of the Saudi government that this money was being directed to support an act of terrorism on the American public?
Bank records. Bank records show deposits and bank records show withdrawals, and they show who made these deposits and who was withdrawing the money. So the bank records support that the money was going to terrorist organizations.
But sorry, my understanding is it was the money from Prince Bandar's wife, for example, that you talked about. My understanding is it went to an Islamic charity, and that the excuse that's being used is that she's a good woman, she's got a lot of money. I think there was $36 million talked about, and that this money was being diverted just for good, noble purposes as a good Islam woman to basically support people less well off than herself. What's the evidence that Prince Bandar, his wife, or senior Saudi government officials actually knew that they were supporting a terrorist attack on America? Because that's the implication of what you're saying.
It is. It's because they were sending money out to the handlers in California that were handling the hijackers. They didn't just give money to charity. They also wrote checks and sent money directly to the handlers of the 9/11 hijackers.
So these were, I think one of them was al-Bayoumi that you've mentioned, Omar al-Bayoumi. And who was this Fahad al-Thumari? He was a Saudi government employee working in the LA consulate, but he was also linked to the King Fahd Mosque in Los Angeles.
Correct. And that is, so Thumari was tasked by some of the employees back at Moya in Washington, D.C., to assist the hijackers when they came to the United States. And so was Bayoumi. So originally their story was that Bayoumi just met these 2 hijackers in a cafe by accident. He heard them speaking Arabic, so he befriended them. But what did he do? He took them to a bank, Bank of America, and he opened up a bank account for them. They gave him $9,999 in cash to open up this bank account. And then he went and signed a lease for their apartment, so that they were very close to where he lived. And then he tried to tell the police, or when he was arrested, his story was, I was just being a good Saudi Arabian citizen. It's what we do. We help people out when we meet them. But do you really go to the extent of opening up bank accounts and putting your name on a lease? And then the story just unfolds and it gets so much bigger, and the net gets so much bigger about who was actually involved in tasking Bayoumi, in tasking Thumari, and the evidence that came out of Bayoumi's apartment tells the whole story.
Okay, so let's deal with this now. The 9/11 report, I'm just using the 9/11 report as a template because I think it's instructive. It's what the American people were told the government determined in what was meant to be a transparent and open and full and rigorous inquiry into 9/11, okay?
Yes.
So this is what the 9/11 report said about what happened with these two terrorists, Hazmi and Midhar, in their first few weeks in the States. So we have investigated whether anyone associated with the King Fahd Mosque assisted them. This subject has received substantial attention in the media. Some have speculated that Fahad al-Thumari, an imam at the mosque and an accredited diplomat at the Saudi Arabian consulate from 96 until 2003, may have played a role in helping the hijackers establish themselves on their arrival in Los Angeles. This speculation is based, at least in part, on Thumari's reported leadership of an extremist faction at the mosque.
Correct.
Now, I know you've got an answer for this, but I'll just finish. The definitive conclusion from 9/11 was the circumstantial evidence makes Thumari a logical person to consider as a possible contact for Hazmi and Midhar. Quote, "Yet, after exploring the available leads, we have not found evidence that Thumari provided assistance to the two operatives." Now, I'll tell you, Terry, I'll say what I think that is. That is bullshit. That is a total lie. They knew at the time, didn't they, about Fahad al-Thumari's funding to these two Al-Qaeda operatives, didn't they?
Well, what the 9/11 Commission knew exactly, I don't know. I can't answer. I can't speak on that. All I know is what they claimed in their final report, and what we know now is two very different things.
We're partnering with Gundry MD to share this information with you. Would you believe it if I told you that in many pantries across the United States right now, there are bottles of a substance that is one of the healthiest foods on the planet? Yep, it's true, and it's not one of those trendy superfoods that costs you a squillion. Spoiler alert, it's olive oil. But not only does it taste good, it makes you feel exceptionally healthy on the inside. And if you accept Dr. Stephen Gundry's research, it also makes you look youthful on the outside. The olive oil industry is huge, and you can tell by the number of olive oil brands you see at the grocery store, and you can bet not all of them are made with the consumer in mind. Many brands cut corners. And so Stephen Gundry has done the research. When he came to this realization about olive oil, he was appalled that some of the olive oils were frankly not that good. But some olive oils, he's discovered, are so powerful it may take only a few teaspoons or tablespoons a week to see these incredible health benefits. So how can you tell between an olive oil that can be a health booster and which one isn't up to par? In an effort to answer that question, Dr. Gundry did his research, and he's taken a stand, and he's releasing his personal research for you to review and make your own judgment on. People who have taken Dr. Gundry's advice have shared their results with him, saying the olive oil they bought after learning his simple rules has changed their lives. So make sure you go to getolive1.com/Ross or click on the link in the description box below. What is it that we know now, Terry, that's been hidden by the US government that they almost certainly knew at the time of the 9/11 Commission report? What is being concealed from the American public about this incredible period in American history? What don't we know? Please tell us.
The 9/11 Commission did not know about this evidence. The FBI did not hand over this evidence to the 9/11 Commission. Therefore, their findings are very different than the truth. So there was also a secret investigation into the kingdom that went on for 10 years post 9/11 called Operation Encore. And that was the FBI doing a very, very thorough job of investigating the attacks. However, that's been released. It's heavily redacted. Our representatives can see a lot more of it than we can, and we are still fighting in court to get it lifted from a protective order in the courtroom. So there's still a lot that's being hidden from us. But okay, so now what do we know? Because of the evidence that was found in Bayoumi's apartment, we know that Thumari and Bayoumi were much closer in relations to the hijackers and they were involved with Al-Qaeda operatives. They were involved with other diplomats that came from the embassy. But the Al-Qaeda operatives, two of them, they're part of the advanced team that Moya sent out to California. And both of them are Al-Qaeda operatives or have very close ties to Al-Qaeda. And those men helped task Bayoumi and Thumari with what needed to be done in this support network to help these hijackers. There was a welcome party where you see Thumari and Bayoumi with the hijackers in a very casual setting. So to tell the FBI or to deny that they knew each other or that they knew them as well as they did has been proven to be wrong. And there's phone records now between everybody. And the phone records don't lie, that they were actually speaking to each other and calling the embassy in Washington, D.C. during this time that the hijackers were just first in the United States and setting up this support network. So those first two advanced team, after they left California, they went to Oklahoma and Missouri. Those are the two places where Hazmi and Madar went after they left California. And the story continues that wherever that those two people went, then those two hijackers followed. So they were setting up what was needed in whatever town they were going to next. Remember, they were here for 12 to 18 months.
What's the most damning piece of evidence that you've seen where Thumari and Bayoumi clearly went beyond just showing Islamic hospitality to these new people who'd arrived in America?
I would say the welcome party, the welcome video that clearly shows that Madar and Hazmi were guests of honor instead of the narrative that they tell is that they were sitting in a back room and they really weren't involved with the people that were there, because when the video camera scans the room is when you learn how many Saudi government officials were in the room.
And what's the evidence, though, that any of those Saudi government officials had any knowledge that these two men were terrorists, hijackers, planning an attack?
Evidence, through the reporting and through the evidence, it shows which jobs they were tasked with. So different ones were tasked to help them with their flying lessons. Different ones were tasked to help them with their bank accounts. Different ones were with their buying a car, their English lessons. All of these individuals that were at this welcome party had jobs to do to help the hijackers.
So just help me here for a moment, Terry. I mean, I still wrestle with this, and I know the answer, but I want you to explain it to our audience. Why on earth would people working for the Saudi Ministry of Islamic Affairs want to launch an attack in any way, sponsor an attack on America, which, after all, is one of Saudi Arabia's biggest customers for its oil and is notionally a close friend of America? what on earth would be the motivation of these people for launching such an attack? And is it possible that these people who were working, I think, through the auspices of the the Ministry of Islamic Affairs in Saudi Arabia, is it possible that they were just a bunch of hotheads who were doing this without the knowledge of the higher ups in the royal family, people like Prince Bandar?
Well, again, there was money going from Prince Bandar's bank account to assist them. And it was Prince Bandar that went to President Bush and asked him to please get them all out of the country. And he didn't want any of them to be questioned. When an Al-Qaeda operative was arrested and they confiscated his phone book, he had the very private phone number of Prince Bandar's residence in Colorado that nobody had. So,
but why? Why would anybody in the Saudi government? I mean, I wrestle with this still. What was going on? Why would the Saudi government, either officially or unofficially, even if it was compromised by a few people from within, why would those people want to launch an attack on America?
Because these were jihadists. These were jihadists with extremist ideology that, wanted to attack and kill Americans. And they found a way to do it, to just come under the radar into the United States, go to the Saudi embassy. Moya, the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, was filled with extremists and like-minded Al-Qaeda operatives. And some had diplomatic credentials that were falsified so that the United States government wouldn't be watching closely what they were doing and what they were up to. So it's a branch of the Saudi government, the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, and it is government officials on the Saudi payroll that created the support network that was needed to carry out the attacks. Their motivation? Osama bin Laden let everybody know when he issued a fatwa years before that he was going to attack the United States on U.S. soil. It was Al-Qaeda that hated the Americans that wanted to do this. And the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was filled with extremists that had Al-Qaeda operatives. So Al-Qaeda is a very well-organized terrorist organization. And they knew the only way they could carry out the attacks is if they had a support network set up in the United States that was, like you said, going kind of under the radar. And for whatever reason, back then, Saudis were not under suspicion. And even though our FBI, there was an FBI agent in Minnesota or Michigan, that called the New York FBI offices to tell them that, these Muslim nationalists or these Saudi nationalists were taking flying lessons and they only wanted to learn how to take off. They didn't want to learn how to land. And she was very concerned about that. Well, that got ignored. The Phoenix, Arizona memo, trying to alert the FBI again that these extremists these people were trying to fly planes and not land them. There were so many warnings that got ignored. And yes, it was an intelligence failure. But when you ask me, why did Saudi Arabia want to attack us? It's because they were filled with radical Islamist terrorists and jihadists. And they were spreading it around the world. They were building their mosques and filling their mosques with these radical clerics. And they were radicalizing people. And it was just a very, very poisonous, venomous program. And it happened. I don't know why or how, but it did.
You've talked about the welcome video, which was the video of the party where al-Bayoumi and Fahad al-Famari hosted the two hijackers, the two terrorists. But there's also another video, which I personally find the most damning. And that's a video that was allegedly shot by al-Bayoumi in 1999. Yeah. And can you explain what that video shows? And for me, the most chilling point in that video is where al-Bayoumi refers to the plan.
Yes. So as part of the evidence that was seized in London, there was a casing of the U.S. Capitol that Bayoumi is in, right? So there's somebody filming Bayoumi while he is in Washington, D.C., and he talks of the plan. And they are carefully going over the entrances, the security posts. They go inside the Capitol. He says greetings, to my esteemed brothers. And he talks about going over to the Washington Monument, and he'll get back to them when he gets over there. He talks about, he sees some workers on a scaffolding, and he goes up and he's looking at it, and he talks about the demons. He said that we, the Americans, call our children the demons. He said they are the demons. It's a very eerie, shocking video to watch in its entirety. You do see and learn, and experts have confirmed. This video was filmed in the 90-day period that Al-Qaeda was choosing its targets in the United States. And the Capitol was one that they were all in agreement that they wanted to use as part of their planning.
In fact, as I understand it, Flight 93 that was brought down in Pennsylvania, it's speculated that it was Flight 93, which was heroically brought down by passengers that fought the terrorists. It was intended to hit the Capitol. And I think on that video, I'll just talk to what the video shows. There's a moment where al-Bayoumi is filming what looks like the X-ray machines, or the machines that scan for weapons as you go into the Capitol building. And he actually says, "You said that in the plan." That's a clear admission that there's some kind of sinister reason for why he's showing the security checkpoints at the Congress, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. And also in the video, when he does get over to the Washington Monument and he scans over to the Smithsonian, and he scans over to the Smithsonian. And if you're looking at an aerial shot between the monument and the Smithsonian, it creates a clear runway to the Capitol.
Now, the thing that really shocks me, Terry, is that video came into the possession of the American authorities within days of the 9/11 attack. Yes. They've had that video since they raided al-Bayoumy's apartment in 2001. Yes. So 23 years ago, they got that video, nearly a quarter of a century ago, and it's only just come out now.
Yes, and it didn't come out because the FBI ever cooperated or wanted it to come out. It came out because our representatives, the 9/11 families, went to London and asked them if we could have it. And they released it to our representatives without a protective order, which meant the public could see it. But then the courts put a protective order on it immediately. And it took months to unravel that decision. And finally, because it did not belong to the FBI and it did not belong to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, because both of those things are under protective order, the judge had to release the protective order and say, this can now go out into the public domain. And yes, so then experts took it and they've translated it into English, and that's why you can see it now. It's on my website. You can see this video, and it is very disturbing and very, very upsetting, not just to see it, but like you said, to know they had it that many years ago.
So just help me here. I'm a bear with a very small brain. I want you to state the bleeding obvious, Terry. Why on earth would officials in the FBI, the American government, perhaps the White House, why would they want to suppress a video which at the very least reflects very poorly on the motivations and the sinister implications behind why a Saudi diplomat, a spy, was filming the Congress in that 90-day period before Osama bin Laden was selecting targets for the attacks that he was planning on America? Why would your government, why would the American government want to hide something like that?
The answers that I've been told are in the beginning when it came over to the FBI that they were understaffed and they were working so hard, worried about another attack, because this is, 10 days to 2 weeks after the attacks. It was in Arabic. This is what I've been told. They didn't have enough translators, and it just looked like, because it's listed as home movies, home videos, that's what Bayoumi wrote on the videos. It looked like home movies. There was a phone book in Arabic. And this is what they tell us. I'm not saying I believe it 100% at all, but that it just didn't seem that important. And it sat around for 10 years in a warehouse, I believe, and was never supposed to be seen by the Americans.
Do you believe that, Terry? I don't believe that for a moment. I think any sensible, seasoned police investigator looking at that video would reach the conclusion that at the very least it provides circumstantial evidence of some kind of a sinister plot. Why would a Saudi intelligence official be filming the Congress's security checkpoints, security officials, even the black cars that they use for escorting politicians? And why would he be saying, "You said that in the plan"? It's more than just a tourist video, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But remember, Bayoumi was not known as a Saudi intelligence operative post 9/11. It wasn't until 2017 that we now can see the FBI reports confirming that he is a Saudi intelligence officer. So their story is that they didn't even look at these videos because Bayoumi wasn't known as to anybody, and that they just saw home videos on them, and so everything was in Arabic. The first guy that popped it into a machine couldn't understand what it was. So this is their story, and that it just got put aside for at least 10 years.
So clearly, America buys an enormous amount of oil from Saudi Arabia. And it's quite obvious that at one stage, President Obama, when he came into power, he sought to stop and block certain things from being made public because the Saudis were actually threatening to pretty much destroy the American economy if the laws that allowed this lawsuit to be taken were enabled. You're up against an incredibly powerful lobby, aren't you? Let's be honest about it. The American government doesn't want to insult the Saudis. They may not like them. They certainly, I know for a fact, they don't like the Wahhabist extremist Islam that they were promoting through their madrasas all around the world, including in my neck of the woods in Indonesia. But they've got to get on with them. And let's be politically pragmatic for a moment. There's still a hell of a lot of redacted information that you and your lawyers want to get your hands on because you think there's more evidence behind the redacted documents that so far you haven't been allowed to see. What do you know about what's behind those redactions? Do you believe that those documents show even greater evidence of Saudi government complicity in the 9/11 attacks?
Yes, 100%. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so heavily redacted, and they'd let us see everything. Everything we know that gets uncovered, the 28 pages, Operation Encore, what was in Bayoumi's apartment, it's always tied to the Saudis. So, yeah, they're still protecting them, and it's extremely frustrating. And the families are getting older. We've lost a lot of family members, parents that have died without any justice for their families. And this is a terrible travesty of justice to allow this lawsuit to go this many years. And the Saudis have not, from what I've seen, produced any evidence. They just want to be dismissed from the case. That's why we just had another hearing on their motion to dismiss, is because that's their defense, is just dismiss us.
So I'm quoting from the lawsuit here. Basically, the lawyers representing Saudi Arabia, they challenged the lawsuit on the basis that they deny that Saudi officials directed support to the hijackers or were otherwise complicit. They say Thumari did not assist the hijackers at all.
Oh.
And they said that his alleged actions would not have fallen within the scope of his official responsibilities. They say that Bayoumi's assistance was minimal and unrelated to terrorist activity, and neither he nor Thumari belonged to a jihadist network.
Oh.
They say the Capitol view the video that we're talking about, is nothing more than a typical home movie by an enthusiastic tourist. And the San Diego video of Bayumi's party in the hijacker's apartment is just a gathering of mosque goers for some purpose unrelated to the presence of two newly arrived al-Qaeda terrorists. So what do you think is going to happen? Obviously, there's still arguments toing and froing in the court. Often the best fun in a court case happens with the argy-bargy, the argument about what documents and what evidence will be allowed in. Do you think that the lawsuit is going to be allowed to proceed with the evidence that you know is hidden behind those redactions?
Oh, I certainly hope so. I don't see how the judge could not keep them in the lawsuit and allow it to continue based on what I saw on the July 31st hearing, where all of this evidence was seen for the very first time. And the kingdom tells a story, but they have no evidence that ever can back up their theories. Because with discovery, we now have the phone records, and we never had that before. The phone records don't lie. You can't, and there were other videos found in the apartment of them with the cleric Alawaki, the known underwear bomber from California. They're in a video with him. There's videos of them with Al-Qaeda operatives. There are phone records of them speaking to Al-Qaeda operatives, and there's money coming, flowing in from charities through Al-Qaeda. The kingdom doesn't even deny that they gave money to Al-Qaeda. They're trying to deny that that the government had anything to do with the 9/11 attacks. But you sent your government officials here to the United States, and they were known jihadist sympathizers. They were extremists. You were doing that around the world. Do we think the United States was immune to that? No. They were filling the mosques with extremists, and they put them in Moya and the Ministry of Islamic Affairs. And what happened next was a horrific, plan and plot to use airplanes as missiles and to hit our landmarks and to murder Americans on American soil. That was Osama bin Laden's grand scheme, and the kingdom funded it and gave the hijackers everything they needed to carry out the attacks.
Let's go back to 9/11. Mm-hmm. We're in the days following 9/11. Let's do something that should have been done by the FBI and all of the intelligence services in the wake of that appalling attack on the American people. Yes, evidence starts emerging of Saudi complicity. We know that 15 of the 19 hijackers are Saudis. That's shocking in and of itself. Then you've got this ridiculous situation where Prince Bandar, the Saudi government senior official in the embassy in Washington, is pleading with the Bush government administration to get all of these Saudi family people, the House of Saud family people, out of America as quickly as possible. But there's a no-fly over the entire continental USA. The FBI is being asked to help facilitate these families. Incredibly, there were police officers who were brought in to help these people get out of the country and get to an airport where they could be put on a plane and flown back to Saudi Arabia. What if, instead of putting all of these people onto the plane, they were deposed and made to do interviews with the FBI before they got onto the plane, and including some of the members of the bin Laden family themselves, who were later implicated in paying money to the Al Haramain charity that was actually funding some of these terror attacks? What if they'd actually taken statements from these people in 2001 before they were allowed to leave the country? And then what if they had aggressively investigated the probability that Saudi government officials were involved in these attacks? Because we now know, as you've rightly pointed out, and as your lawsuit demonstrates, we know that these two Saudi government officials were involved with these hijackers. What if the United States government, instead of tugging its forelock to the Saudi Arabian government and saying, yes, sir, no, sir, we don't want to lose your oil, what if they'd taken them on and said, this is appalling, this is outrageous, you are a friend of our country, you have attacked our country and murdered our citizens, you will get to the bottom of this now, and we do not care at all what it will take to get to the bottom of this. We will annihilate you if you don't give us the answers. What if the US had played tough with the Saudis and actually done the job of properly investigating what you're revealing now? Do you think we would have got a different result?
Yes, I do think we would definitely have gotten a different result. We would have gotten the truth instead of lies and cover up all these years.
Do you think that the lawsuit is going to be influenced by the American government? I mean, the government can plead sovereign privilege. I don't know what you call it over there, but over here in Australia, we have a thing called public interest immunity, which allows the government to basically disguise or hide anything it wants to hide that involves national security or international relations. If they don't want to upset a government and there's something stinky in a document they don't want revealed, they can hide it. Now, your government can pretty much do the same, can't it?
Yes. Yes, and they have done the same. That's why we haven't seen all of this information for nearly 2 decades. But the lawsuit with Discovery, and President Biden in 2021 issued an executive order that mandated our intelligence agencies to go back and declassify everything to the greatest extent possible. The FBI, the DOJ, the CIA have been dragging their feet. They do not cooperate with the executive order fully. But then other things have come out, like this evidence that was found in Bayumi's apartment. I mean, thank God we have that. And some of the heavily redacted documents, the representatives can see more than we can see. So a lot of names have been revealed over the years now. It wasn't just those 2 individuals. Yes, they were the ones tasking to help them directly, but they had dozens, 27 to 30 other Saudi officials helping them out. So it's it's just completely outrageous that this was kept.
It makes me very angry. And I mean, obviously you lost a loved one and obviously many friends in the attacks in New York. I mean, I saw what happened in Bali and I'll never forget that. And to me, the thing that really shocked me was the tolerance that was shown by my government, by the Indonesian government, towards the Saudis, who were implicated in funding this poisonous Wahhabist, Islamist, really hateful strand of Islam. And I don't know if you know much about Indonesia, but when I first traveled there as a very young man, it had a beautiful form of Islam called Sufi Islam, which was a very gentle and kind form of Islam. And over the last 30 or 40 years, I've watched the radicalization of young people, including intelligent middle-class people, very rich people in Indonesia, who are being poisoned by this cancerous Wahhabist streak of Islam. And it led to the attacks of 9/11. And the thing that really shocks me from what you're saying is the cover-up about the Saudis' involvement in doing that. Even if they've changed their tune now, it continues to this day.
Yes, it does. I don't, obviously, how can I possibly know the reasons other than what I could imagine is that the kingdom or the Saudi government is the lesser of the 2 evils in the Middle East between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And if we can continue propping up the kingdom and that trying to keep some peace in the Middle East has to do with the survival of the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But it doesn't excuse them for what they did. It doesn't excuse them for the spread of Wahhabism, this cancerous form of Islam that they financed and allowed to flourish. They unleashed the Frankenstein on the world, and innocent Americans were murdered on September 11th, and nobody should have to bear witness to the carnage left behind of a terrorist attack like you have witnessed and the rescue workers witnessed. And wherever a horrible attack happens, innocent people see things they can't unsee, and rescue workers and policemen, are part of that. They have to witness carnage. Nobody should. So I've really taken on this mission because I want justice for the 9/11 families. I want justice for the murder of my husband. But I also hope that we can deter future terrorist attacks by exposing this underbelly, the financial network that supports extremism. And yes, the kingdom was the father of Al-Qaeda, and Sudan was its mother. That's where the terrorists were nurtured and trained and protected. Iran wasn't any better. So it's about rooting out the evil and trying to expose it and creating better policies going forward.
So where are you at with the lawsuit? What's the status of the lawsuit at the moment?
Right now, we are waiting for the judge to make his determination whether he will dismiss the kingdom or keep them in the lawsuit. So they have filed a motion to be dismissed. The hearing was on July 31st. It's where a lot of this evidence came out, and the kingdom had nothing to really show. The kingdom really was very weak in their arguments. They tried to tell the judge that the plane drawings and the trajectories that show calculations to hit a target on the ground were Bayoumi's son's homework. That was their defense. Bayoumi himself, in his own deposition, did not say anything about that being his son's homework. So that is how weak their defense is, because you can't defend the indefensible. So they really have very little, and they don't have things to argue in the court. All they want is to be dismissed. Because they know they don't have a case. And I'm really, we're on pins and needles here. The families, we're headed towards the anniversary. It's a very disturbing time of year for us. And the judge hasn't ruled yet. And we don't know when he will. It'll just come one day. We don't know yet.
How deep would this go for the families to see the judge throwing out the lawsuit against the Saudi Arabian government in light of what you know?
Oh boy. I don't want to live in a world where the poor families will have to go through something that traumatic to another dismissal, because they have been dismissed in the past, but they were dismissed before this discovery was ever happened. And now that we have all of this evidence, none of us can possibly imagine that they will be dismissed. But if they are, then we have to go back to the appellate courts and we have to appeal the decision. And we have to encourage Congress to enact legislation that solidifies what the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act was meant to do. And that is to be able to apply aiding and abetting correctly. So there's even sometimes a technicality that could cause a dismissal. We're trying to just tie up all the loose ends to ensure that that never happens. But the evidence speaks for itself. They were definitely complicit in the attacks at a level nobody knew before this evidence came out.
Well, Terry Strada, I think anybody watching this, at the very least, wants to make sure that you and all the other families of the victims of 9/11 get the opportunity to have your day in court. I think most Americans would be offended by the idea of the American government cravenly participating in a cover-up to conceal evidence of Saudi government complicity, if that exists. And yes. I think that the simple fact that a government might feel cowed about allowing a lawsuit to go ahead because it's worried about the damage to the economy, there's no way that morally this should be allowed to be hindered. There should be an open and public accounting for what really happened in 9/11. And I think most people in the world would be behind you.
Yes, thank you. And you're absolutely right. Congress supports our day in court, right? They support legislation, and then they support our efforts. It's been our administrations, and it's been every single one of them. The Bush administration started it when they excised the 28 pages from the joint inquiry and fully redacted that. Then when President Obama came along, for 7 years, we were trying to get the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act enacted. 7 years, his entire presidency, and he vetoed it. When the 9/11 families had to go back to Congress and ask them to please, do your best to override the veto, and they did. And that was the one and only veto override of his entire presidency. So he was no help to us. He never wanted us to have our day in court. And then comes along President Trump. And now we're in the courtrooms. We just need the evidence. And we go to him personally, to Washington, D.C., to the White House on the 19th anniversary of September 11th. Family members, I was one of them, and asked him to please, release this evidence. And the very next day, AG Barr stamped state secrets across everything. And it was an egregious abuse of the state secrets process, because you can only, in this country, apply state secrets if it's a threat to national security. And there was no threat to national security having any of this released. So what happens after Trump leaves office is President Biden comes in and he issues we go for the Transparency Act, the 2021 Transparency Act. I was there in front of the Capitol introducing the bill, and within months, very short amount of time, Biden picked up the legislation and he used the language and he wrote this executive order and he said, give them everything to the best that you can. And the FBI still held on to all of that Bayumi evidence. So our intelligence agencies do not cooperate and they do not help us. And the administration is who the Department of Justice answers to. So again, Congress really cares and they do the best that they can. And that's why I need them to enact the Ensuring Justice for Victims of Terrorism Act, because that's a technical fix to the bill JASTA. We just need to make sure that our laws are as strong as they can be to hold sponsors of terrorism attacks responsible in a courtroom. But it's been every administration. Doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. Everyone comes in and they get told somehow, somewhere, that you're going to side with the Saudis and you're not going to help the families.
Well, Terry Strada, you are a formidable advocate for your cause. And if I was the Saudi government or the American government trying to cover this up, I'd be putting up the flag of surrender. So I think everyone wishes you the very, very best in your lawsuit. Justice is all about shining light onto things that aren't being revealed. And so we wish you all the best. And thank you so much for joining Reality Check.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.